The check was the first thing I saw, beaded with rain, trapped under my windshield wiper like a white flag. I'd been standing in the parking lot for 5 minutes with my suitcase and a dead phone, negotiating with the universe about whether I could make it to Milwaukee on $80 and pride. Then the town car ghosted up beside my 10-year-old Civic, the back window gliding down as if my life had a stage manager. "Don't sign anything until October 1st, the man said, voice level, unbothered by the downpour. "Put the suitcase back in the trunk, Alina." I hate that he knew my name. "Who are you?" I asked, hugging my tote to my ribs so he wouldn't see my hands shake. "Someone who'd like your husband to keep breathing but stop winning." He nodded at the envelope. "Cashier's check. 100,000. Clean. Not a bribe, consider it, tuition." "I'm leaving Daniel," I said. It came out small. "I'm done." He did not blink. "If you go now, he paints you as unstable and files for fault. The board will pity him. The investors will close ranks. He'll keep the condo, the options, and the narrative. You'll keep your dignity, which, tragically, does not pay for lawyers." The rain misted his sleeve. He didn't flinch. "People like him never get wet." "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Patience," he said. 30 days. And your signature at the right moment, on the right document, not the one he brings." His eyes cut toward the hotel behind me. "You were about to drive away with no plan except crying on the interstate. You deserve a better plan." I was still holding the tote, still tasting last night's shrimp cocktail when it started, the unraveling, the humiliation, the slow-motion car crash. Daniel's FinTech won Startup of the Year, and I played the supportive spouse in a navy dress I could not afford. Champagne, speeches, him kissing my temple for cameras he forgot I could see too. His phone face up at the bar while he shook hands with men who called me Mrs. Cohen like a job title. A text popped across the lock screen with 2 innocuous words, Room 112. "I'm not a detective. I'm just good at pretending I'm fine." I smiled. I took a photo of him with the sponsor backdrop. I laughed in the wrong places. Then I excused myself because the heel of my left shoe had snapped, which was true, and because I couldn't breathe, which was truer. Room 112 was 3 doors down from the ice machine. I knocked with the knuckle that hurts in the cold. I didn't open the door. It opened a sliver by itself. Voices. A woman's giggle, young, but not naive. I caught a reflection in the dresser mirror. Daniel's jacket on a chair, Daniel's tucked shirt unbuttoned, Daniel's hand on a waist I'd seen before at the office. In turn, I thought numbly. No, contract videographer. The one who filmed the glossy founder reels and told him to hold that grin like it belonged to her. I didn't go in. I didn't scream. I walked back through the lobby past a man in a gray suit I recognized from a handful of investor decks, the kind of man whose presence makes junior partners tuck their shirts in twice. He looked at me too long, in a way that felt like diagnosis. Minutes later, I was in the rain with a suitcase and a phone blinking 2%. Now he was in a car, telling me my marriage had an expiration date only he could see. "Who are you?" I said again. He gave me a name I'd seen on cap tables and puff pieces, Ira Feld, the quiet founder of a payments conglomerate that my husband alternately worshipped and feared. "You know Daniel?" I asked. "I know his board," he said. "And I know the videographer's uncle, who asked me to keep this civil." His mouth quirked. "She makes poor choices. He makes worse." I wanted to vomit. I wanted to sleep for a month. I wanted my mother. "What's October 1st? Q4 comp packets go out. Your husband needs your spousal joinder on a new equity plan and a drag-along consent for a pending acquisition. 2 signatures. One keeps him rich. The other keeps him in the CEO chair. The bylaws require the spouse to acknowledge marital property status. That's you." "My signature is a rubber stamp," I said, though I wasn't sure. "Daniel always said he'd handle the paperwork because legalese gives you hives." It did. So did men saying legalese. "It's a lock," Ira said evenly. "And locks have keys. Do you want tuition or not?" I looked at the envelope again. The blue watermark glowed like a dare. I could taxi to Wisconsin and sleep on my cousin's futon, or I could take a stranger's money and sleep in the bed of a man who managed his image like a hedge fund. I heard my own voice, thin and sensible, pharmacist voice, protocol voice, ask, "What happens if I don't sign?" Then he scrambles, cries sabotage, maybe finds a workaround. He'd survive. Men like him always do. Ira's tone didn't change, but something in his eyes did. "If you wait and sign the right document, my document, he stays long enough to indict himself." HR complaints. Retaliation. A clean keyman event. Not gossip. Not scandal. Procedure. Keyman, I repeated dully. Like insurance? Like governance. The board can remove a CEO if he triggers a bad actor clause. But they need cause. You will help us get cause. He paused. You won't need to lie. I would be agreeing to, what? To a code of conduct addendum folded into the spousal joinder. It references existing policies he's already obligated to. All we need is your acknowledgement, which forces the company to treat your complaint like a shareholder matter, not a domestic tiff. If he retaliates against you, he's out. With forfeiture. Retaliates. The word felt both clinical and dirty. You're asking me to stay in that condo for 30 days and bait my husband into being himself. I'm asking you to breathe, he said. To document. To stop narrating yourself as the girl with the suitcase. You are not a victim, Mrs. Cohen. You are a witness with standing. And he left it there, which was somehow worse than begging. The window slid up. The town car glided away. The check shivered under my wiper. I put the suitcase back in the trunk. The condo smelled like cedar and victory when I got home. Daniel had beaten me there, of course, he always did. He was in the kitchen without his tie, sleeves rolled, making an omelette like a commercial. I was worried, he said, which meant I noticed you left. He kissed my forehead, which meant we're not talking about it. He poured me a glass of wine and said, can you be at the office tomorrow to sign a couple routine things? Small stuff. Paperwork. You know how it is. I pictured room 112. Sure, I said. Small stuff. He smiled, relieved that I was still me, the soft place to land. We'll get through this quarter, he murmured into my hair. Then it's all upside. He ate. I watched. He went to shower. I went to the bedroom and opened the cedar box where I keep my licenses and the kind of documents women are taught to laminate. I added the check. I added a notebook. And then, because my hands needed a job besides shaking, I labeled the notebook impatient, clinical handwriting, October. When Daniel came to bed, he reached for me like habit. I flinched so slightly that even I could pretend I hadn't. Are you okay? He asked, genuinely puzzled. I thought of Ira's window sliding up like a curtain call. I'm just tired, I said. Wake me if I'm still asleep in the morning. I don't want to be late to sign, whatever it is. He kissed the top of my head and turned off the lamp. In the dark, I could hear the lake wind and my own breath and a voice that sounded newly, terrifyingly clear. You can survive 30 days. You can read every word. You can turn procedure into a blade. I did not sleep. I memorized. Inspired by the pacing and tone of the sample you shared, I'll build a fresh, original arc across 6 parts from here. Daniel woke before my alarm and was already moving like a fundraiser, the breezy cheer, the forward lean. He slid a cappuccino to my side of the island as if caffeine could lacquer over last night. Car picks us up at 9, he said. Legal likes to do these things in the conference room. Takes 10 minutes. Tops. These things? I kept my voice neutral. Routine spousal joinders, conflict attests, consent to the equity plan. Boring. He kissed my hairline, careful not to smudge his collar. We'll get brunch after and complain about how grown up we are. Sound good? I smiled at my coffee instead of him. I'll meet you there, I said. I have an errand. He didn't ask what. He never asks uncalculated questions. My errand was a drugstore for a fresh spiral notebook and a pack of blue pens. The cheap kind that never run out at the wrong moment. I labeled the new notebook office and tucked it behind October. Then I took the cashier's check out of the cedar box and slid it into a manila folder marked receipts. If I was going to betray the version of myself who never accepted help, I at least wanted it to look administrative. The rideshare dropped me in front of a brick building that tried to look old on purpose. Inside, concrete floors, plants that looked like they understood venture debt, a neon sign that said do hard things like an apology. The receptionist recognized me by the way she angled her smile down, sympathetic. They're waiting for you, she said, handing me a visitor badge that stuck halfway to my blouse like it was embarrassed to be seen. The conference room smelled like new carpet and nervous citrus. Daniel stood when I entered, polite for the glass wall. Beside him, Marcy from HR, a woman who did not blink enough, and Lila from legal, immaculate in charcoal with a thin gold necklace like a line drawn with a ruler. Hey, babe, Daniel said, too bright. Thanks for swinging by. Lila slid a packet across the table. No staples. I clocked it. This is the spousal joinder acknowledging marital property status with respect to the 2026 Equity Incentive Plan, she said, enunciating as if I were either a paralegal or a brick. And this is a short-form consent to the drag-along provision for a potential future transaction. We prefer to keep spouses in the loop. Marcy chimed in with a practiced half-laugh. Married founders, am I right? I opened the packet. The fonts tried to make it friendly. In a blue pen, I wrote the date at the top, October 2nd, in my neatest pharmacist numbers. Then I started reading, line by line, even the parts that felt like lint. Daniel shifted once, twice. "Alina," he said finally, light warning in his tone. "It's boilerplate." "I'm allergic to boilerplate," I said without looking up. Clause 6, Acknowledgement of Community/Marital Property. Clause 7, Consent to unvested equity subject to forfeiture for cause. Clause 8, Mutual release of claims as to prior conduct. My pen underlined mutual release. My stomach pinched. "Prior conduct?" I asked, as if we were discussing a recipe. "What does that cover?" Lila smiled the way people smile before dental x-rays. "Just standard language to prevent future disputes about interactions that occurred before the effective date. Clean slate. Very common." Marcy nodded so hard her lanyard thumped. "It protects everyone." "What if I have a concern about an interaction?" I asked, mild. "Involving an employee." Daniel's jaw worked for a second before he remembered he was on camera. Because of course the cameras were on. This is what glass walls are for. "Alina," he said, bending warmth around my name, "we don't need to drag personal stuff through work. That's why this is helpful. Separation of church and state." I traced the letter R in release until the ink pooled. Over Lila's legal scent, paper and something metallic, I caught a faint thread of perfume, green apple, white musk, the kind magazines call clean. My throat tightened. Last night in the hallway, that same clean note had cut through the hotel's industrial detergent. And on Lila's left wrist, where her sleeve pushed back as she pointed to a signature line, a crescent of red, a welt or a scratch, small, fresh. It landed in me with a click I didn't like, the sliver of a mirror in room 112, the messy reflection of a tucked shirt and a hand on a waist, my own brain rushing to fill in the videographer. It wasn't the videographer. It was Lila. The person whose job it was to make this tidy was the person who had messed it up. "Alina?" Lila's voice floated from a careful distance. "Do you have questions about that clause?" I kept my eyes on the page. "Could you print me a copy to take home and read?" "My hives," I said, tapping the corner. "Legalese." Daniel's smile thinned. "Honey, it's truly nothing. We need these executed to go out with the comp packet by end of day." "I'll drive them back in an hour signed," I said. "You have my word." Marcy and Lila flicked a look between each other, a little relay baton of control. "We actually prefer to close these while the spouse is physically present," Marcy said, "to prevent undue influence." She smiled like an HR poster. "On either side." "Undue influence," I repeated softly. I uncapped my pen again, let it hover, then capped it. "Then let's call this due influence. I'm not signing a mutual release without understanding what I'm releasing." Daniel's hand found the back of my chair in a possessive gesture dressed up as affection. "Alina," he murmured. "Please." And there it was, the first nudge toward retaliation, pleasurable in his mouth, coercive in mine. I could hear Ira's voice as if from the corner of the ceiling, "You won't need to lie." A knock landed. The receptionist eased the door open. "Courier for Mrs. Cohen." The envelope had my name printed by hand in tiny engineer letters. Inside, 3 pages on an outside firm's letterhead. Title, Spousal Acknowledgement of Code of Conduct and Escalation Pathways. The addendum Ira promised. It referenced the company's existing policy, anti-harassment, non-retaliation, and placed my acknowledgement squarely under the governance umbrella, not HR's rug. It did not release anything. It did not gag anything. It gave me a map. "What is that?" Lila asked, light as dust. "Something that doesn't give me hives," I said. "I want this attached to any document I sign." Lila's smile returned, brittle around the edges. "We'll need to run that by counsel." "I thought you were counsel," I said, too gently. Daniel's hand left my chair. "We don't need to make this adversarial," he said, eyes warning now. "We're all on the same team." "Then read it," I said, passing the addendum across the table. My pen skated once more under mutual release and then drew a neat line through the clause. "Strike this. Attach that." Marcy swallowed in a way that made the tendons in her neck jump. Lila's eyes flicked to Daniel, then to the glass wall, then back to me. For a second, the room went quiet enough to hear the air vent's small, disapproving sigh. "This is highly irregular," Lila said. "So is your perfume," I almost said. Instead, so is asking a spouse to sign away claims about prior conduct inside a workplace. Daniel's smile vanished like a light turned off. "Alina, step outside with me," he said, voice lowering. "Now." I stood slowly. The hallway was all echo. He took my elbow harder than he meant to and immediately softened his grip as if the building would file a report. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "You're embarrassing me." There it is, I thought, and felt my heart steady. Out loud, "I'm reading." "That's new." "I know." He exhaled through his nose the way he does at airport security. Sign the clean packet. We can add your little addendum later if legal blesses it. No, I said, and for the first time in months the word didn't feel like a crime. We do it right or not at all. He closed his eyes for one beat, then opened them into something flatter. If you don't sign today, the board will read it as you being difficult. It will hurt me. Do you want to hurt me? The question wasn't a question. It was a bet that I was still the soft place to land. Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. Behind the conference room glass, Lila had lifted the addendum and was reading in tiny, precise sips. I watched her face not change. Then, without looking up, she reached for a red pen, the lawyer's real scalpel, and the faintest flicker crossed her mouth. Not a smile. An acknowledgement. She knew exactly what this was. Fine, she said when we stepped back in. We can attach the acknowledgement and strike clause 8. I'll initial the margin. Plot twist number 1 landed where no one could say it aloud. The person who wanted this clean had been in room 112 with my husband. Plot twist number 2 came with the red pen. She was also the one who might save him, or bury him, depending on which side of governance she decided to stand on. I signed my name next to the addendum, not on the release. Lila initialed. Marcy did her brittle smile. Daniel's face wore the kind of calm that only exists in photos. As I slid the signed acknowledgement back into the courier envelope, my phone buzzed with a new email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, I'm not who you think I am. Attachment, a still from the hotel's hallway camera. In the grainy frame, my profile in the lobby, Ira behind me, and then, 2 minutes later, a man in a gray suit I didn't know, following me out into the rain. Subject lines don't usually raise your blood pressure. This one did. I'm not who you think I am. The attachment finished downloading while I stood in the elevator, clutching the courier envelope like a flotation device. Grainy hotel footage, the lobby last night. Me, small and sharp at the front desk. Ira behind me, looking like a rumor. 2 minutes later, a man in a gray suit followed me out into the rain. The frame froze on his face mid-turn, indistinct, the way guilt looks on camera. A second email arrived before the doors opened. Don't reply. Meet me at the cafe across from your building in 15. Back table. Wear your hair down. No signature. Daniel was still in the conference room with Marcy and Lila, performing calm. I typed a calendar block on my phone, pharmacy call, and waved the envelope. I'm going to scan these, I told Daniel. He nodded without really seeing me. Lila didn't look up. Outside, the wind tasted like lake iron. The cafe smelled like cinnamon pretending to be warmth. Back table, a woman in a denim jacket and a black baseball cap pulled low, hair tucked inside like a secret. When she looked up, I recognized her jawline from a dozen office sizzle reels. The videographer. The one I'd decided had been in room 112. Bree, she said, offering a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. Short for Brielle. You can call me Bree. I sat, palms slick. Why me? Because, she said, thumb tracing a coffee ring on the table, I made a mess trying to clean up your husband. And you're the only person who can keep it from getting weaponized. I waited. The footage, she said, tapping her phone. I pulled it as a favor to Lila after last night. She glanced at my face. She told me you might have seen something. She wanted to see who saw who. Lila asked you? The name felt chalky in my mouth. She's been documenting for months. Bree's voice lowered. I did a lot of Founder Halo videos for Daniel. On-camera genius, slow-motion code, cutaway shots of white bards. Her lip quirked. I thought it was my big break. Then he started testing boundaries. Comments about lighting that were really about bodies. Requests for late edits that involved hotel bars. The first time he brushed my waist, I laughed it off. The second time, I told Lila. She took me seriously. She looped in outside counsel quietly. She started building a road that would hold if we had to run on it. I thought of the red pen, the precise initials, the clause she'd cut. And room 112? I asked carefully. Bree's eyes didn't flinch. Lila booked the room under her name to confront him off the office floor. 2 of us waited with our phones on voice memo. Daniel showed up half-drunk and tried to turn the confrontation into charm. When it didn't work, he reached. Lila blocked him. He caught her wrist. That's the scratch you saw. She swallowed. There was no. It wasn't. I wasn't in that room. My body ran 2 tracks, relief and humiliation. Relief because the reflection in the mirror had lied to me or I had made it lie. Humiliation because I had built a narrative on a sliver and fallen in love with its certainty. Bree slid a paper across the table. A crisp photocopy of the cashier's check that had been shaking under my wiper this morning. She tapped the routing number. This is why I reached out. Don't cash that. It's from Ira, I said, a little too defensive. He said, I know what he said, she cut in, not unkindly. He can be the cavalry and a wildfire at the same time. That routing number doesn't go to his family office. It routes to a Delaware vehicle that's been paying consulting fees to 3 board members for 18 months. I picked it off a shot from an investor dinner sizzle because I'm a nerd and I freeze frame bank folders when people don't close them. Her mouth tugged. If you deposit that, someone will call it extortion. Or influence. Or worse. They will muddy you up until your own mother asks if you did it for the money. My throat went dry. How do you know it's not just sloppiness? Because I saw this man, she said, flipping her phone to the still of the gray suit. She zoomed. The profile sharpened into a geometry I recognized from LinkedIn scrolls over Daniel's shoulder. That's Gordon Vance. Independent director, audit committee, reputation like stone. He left the hotel 2 minutes after you, walked straight to the curb, and got into the same town car Ira uses when he wants to be seen but not named. You think that's an accident? The cafe clinked around us. Somewhere a steamer screamed. Why are you telling me? I managed. Because Lila can't. Bree's voice softened. She's inside the blast radius. You're adjacent. And because you already did the bravest part this morning, making them strike the release and attach the acknowledgement. That locked in a path. If you take Ira's money, they can drag you off it. My phone buzzed. New text from a number not in my contacts. Conference room B. 2 minutes. Use the side stairs. No name. A moment later, tell Bree to put the hat back on. Cameras. I didn't need the signature to know it was Lila. We took the stairs like teenagers ditching class. Conference room B was smaller, blinds drawn. Lila stood with her hands on a folder as if keeping it from floating away. She looked at me, then at Bree, then at the envelope in my hand. You have the check? She asked. Yes. May I see it? I passed it over. She didn't touch it. Smart. She studied the numbers like they were a poem with a bad line. He used Vance's fund, she murmured. Of course he did. Plausible deniability wrapped in governance. Bree says it's a trap, I said. Is it? Yes, Lila said. And no. She finally met my eyes. It's leverage while it looks clean. It becomes a trap the minute it looks dirty. Right now it's a gift from a respected elder statesman to a distressed spouse. In court photos, it's a bag of cash. The difference is context. Okay, I said slowly. Context. Lila slid a thin booklet toward me. Board calendar. Tomorrow at 7 a.m. The audit committee meets in this building. Vance chairs it. Ira will call in. There's a last-minute agenda item, Q4 compensation alignment and risk review. They plan to bless the equity plan, pre-wire drag along, and, if I'm reading tea leaves properly, discuss whether it's time to support Daniel with a president who really runs the shop. Her mouth moved around a thought she didn't say. They want him strong enough to sell, weak enough to steer. And me? You are the only person who can turn Daniel's habit into governance, not gossip. She tapped the acknowledgement we'd attached. You file a formal concern to the board's compliance inbox tonight, time-stamped, documented, citing the policy. You attend the audit committee session as a stakeholder under that policy. They cannot legally ignore you without creating minutes they'll regret. That's bold, Bree said softly, admiration and terror duking it out. Lila's eyes flicked to the envelope across the table. And you don't cash that check. You hand it to the committee and ask on the record, is this how we treat spouses with standing? Watch who looks away. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. Where does Ira land? Lila's mouth did that not smile again. On both feet, no matter what. Don't expect a savior. Expect a witness who picks the winning side. We were interrupted by a soft knock. The door opened a crack. Daniel's silhouette filled it, careful, composed. There you are, he said, performing husband. We need to finish signing. He stepped inside, closed the door. The quiet changed. Bree, he said with bland recognition, like identifying a plant. We'll sort out your invoice. Then to Lila, I trust we're aligned on the language. Lila's face was a surface you could skate on. We are, she said. Clause 8 is struck. The acknowledgement is attached. Daniel didn't look at me. He looked at the envelope. What's in the courier? Context, I said. He reached for it. I placed my hand on top. We held like that for a second, married fingers not touching, pressure transmitting things we'd never say. Then my phone buzzed again. New email. Same anonymous account. Final tip, check the memo line on the original check under sunlight. It's heat reactive. My stomach dropped. I slipped the check halfway out under the window's winter light. The white at the bottom bloomed faint gray. Letters ghosted into view, slow as bruises. Retention, keep her quiet. Plot twist. It wasn't just a gift. It was a message designed to appear when convenient, and only to the person who held it. Daniel blinked, just once, too slow. Lila inhaled. Bree whispered a word my grandmother would have washed out with soap. I slid the check back into its sleeve, pulse jackhammering. Tomorrow, I said to Lila, voice steady. Audit committee. I'll be there. Good, she said. Daniel's eyes finally found mine. Calculations ricocheted behind them. Alina, he said softly. Let's go home. I knew he'd try to fix the story before morning. The surprise was how gentle he made the trap feel. At home, Daniel cooked like apology, shallots sweating low, pasta water salted like the ocean. He cued a playlist that used to make me feel young in our first apartment and talked about nothing. A coworker's birthday cake disaster, the neighbor's loud blender, a podcast about trees that communicate. Every detail soft as a throw blanket. When he finally said my name, he set the knife down first. Alina, he murmured, palms open. Today got messy. I'm sorry. I should have prepped you better. Prepped me for what? I asked, signing away prior conduct. His eyes flickered but the smile didn't. For legal's tone. They can be clinical. It felt cold. I'm sorry. A pause. A practiced exhale. We could take a day. Breathe. I've already emailed the board that my spouse has questions. They'll respect that. I'll ask legal to rework the clause. He was sanding the edges of a door he'd slammed himself. I watched him stir the sauce he didn't taste. I'm filing a formal concern tonight, I said, steady. Per policy. I'll attend the audit committee at 7. I wanted in the minutes that I objected to a mutual release and that an addendum acknowledging compliance is attached to anything I sign. For just a breath, something flashed, then the lid shut. If that's what you need, he said, a touch too bright. We're a team. He reached to squeeze my shoulder and clipped the edge of my collarbone. Reflexively, I flinched. He clocked it and softened his hand into a pat, fatherly. You're tired, he said. Let me handle the logistics, okay? I did not say okay. He went to rinse plates. I went to the bedroom, opened October, and drafted the email to the compliance inbox Lila had circled and read. I wrote it like a pharmacist writes dosing instructions. No adjectives, all facts. Date and time. Room number. Clause 8 language. The addendum attached. Photos of the cashier's check, and a separate photo of the heat-reactive memo under sunlight. Retention. Keep her quiet. I hit send. I BCC'd the outside counsel address printed on the addendum's header, plus my own old Gmail I never use for anything heavier than dog photos. Timestamp, 9:42 p.m. In the living room, Daniel laughed at something on TV that didn't sound funny. At 10:03, he knocked softly. Do you want tea? He asked. I'm good, I said through the door. I turned off the lamp and lay awake, counting the tiny breaths between car tires on wet asphalt. Around midnight he climbed in beside me with a sigh that felt rehearsed. At 1:20, I heard the glow of his phone under the duvet. At 1:22, the light went dark. I was in the lobby by 6:05 a.m. Bree materialized out of the blue morning with a thermos and a second badge. Lila's in transit, she whispered. Security'll say observers only, but your acknowledgement puts you under stakeholder. Use the word. It spooks them. On the 11th floor, the air had that pre-meeting hush, the quiet clink of cups, the rustle of tabs. A woman with an impeccable chignon distributed board books labeled Q4 compensation alignment/risk review/draft agenda. Her nameplate read K. Walsh, committee secretary. I caught the faintest whiff of toner and eucalyptus. She slid a copy to me without looking. I flipped tabs in small, steady motions. Behind me, Gordon Vance arrived wearing grandfather gravity and a flawless charvet tie. Good morning, he said to the room, the way judges say order. A monitor on the wall popped to life with remote tiles. Ira's square lit green, his background blurred, voice smooth. Shall we? Before they could gavel the agenda, I stood. My voice didn't shake. Alina Cohen. As a stakeholder under the company's compliance policy, I lifted the addendum. I'm here to file a formal concern and ask that my statement be entered into the minutes. K. Walsh looked to Vance. Vance looked to outside counsel, a silver-haired woman in navy. She has standing, counsel said. Policy 3. 2. We should hear her. Daniel slid in a beat late, drawing 2 chairs closer together that weren't meant to touch. He didn't look at me. Apologies, he said to the room, wife-shaped object in his peripheral vision. His voice was perfect. My pulse counted. Before my statement, I said, I need to address a document in this book. I tapped the tab labeled Executed Spousal Consents. Page 34 showed a neat list. Cohen, Alina, received 2214. Beneath it, a scan of my signature, slanted flourish, the long tail I only do when I'm calm. Beside it, a notary stamp, Lila Burns/Notary Public/Commission number 541-19/ expires July 24th. The room shifted, molecules rearranging. I didn't sign this, I said, too evenly. I turned to counsel. And Lila's commission expired last July. Notaries can continue to notarize with expired commissions? I let the question hang like a coat. Absolutely not, counsel said, crisp. Dance's head lifted, gaze narrowing. Ms. Walsh? The secretary's fingers fluttered over her keyboard. Upload occurred at 22:16 via board portal, she said. User credential, EA_Cohen. She frowned. That's Mr. Cohen's executive assistant account. Daniel's face did a small, perfect performance of confusion. Kara's on PTO, he said. This must be a technical error. It isn't, a voice said from the doorway. Lila stepped in, hair damp from the wet morning, eyes like a blade. She set a sealed envelope on the table. My commission expired July 24th, as counsel noted. At 10:11 p.m. last night, I received an automated alert that a notarization with my expired stamp number had been appended to a spousal consent. I was not at my desk. I preserve my alerts. Her jaw ticked. I also preserve my stamp in a locked drawer. I checked it at 10:25. The drawer had been opened. The stamp was gone. She slid a thumb drive toward counsel. Security footage, 10th floor corridor, 10:02 p.m. Mr. Cohen enters legal with a keycard. 10:08, an executive assistant, Kara, follows. 10:13, they exit with a leather folio. 10:16, an upload hits the portal from the EA login. She breathed once. I have the logs. Daniel didn't blink. He just pivoted. We were retrieving a prior consent that my spouse had already signed, he said smoothly. We have a scan on file from our 2021 mortgage refinance. The stamp must have bled over in the scan. Honest mistake. He looked at me with wounded patience. Alina, you remember. I remember the refinance, I said. I also remember the notary coming to the condo at 10 in the morning, not 10 at night, and my signature having a short tail because I spilled coffee and rushed. I held up the board book page. This tail is long. I only do that when I am calm. I wasn't calm in 2021. A low sound moved through the room, part inhale, part calculation. Ira's voice came cool through the speaker. The audit committee does not adjudicate marriage, he said. We do adjudicate process. Ms. Walsh, strike the consent. Counsel, begin an inquiry. Already drafting, counsel said, fingers hawk fast. And the check? I added, drawing the envelope from my bag. I slipped the cashier's check into the light pouring from the window. The memo bloomed, retention, keep her quiet. I held it like an X-ray. I received this under my windshield wiper yesterday. Routing number traces to a Delaware vehicle paying consulting fees to 3 directors. If I deposit it, I become a weapon. So I'm handing it to the committee. Is this how we treat spouses withstanding? Walsh's pen stilled. Dance's face didn't change, but his left hand tightened on his chair arm. For a beat, no one spoke. Then, from the doorway again, another voice. It's not the board's money. We all turned. Kara stood there, pale, a folder clutched too high. Her voice shook but she didn't. It's Daniel's. He routed it through the Delaware fund because he knew Ira's people would recognize his family office. He made me scan the memo paper with the heat-reactive ink. He said it was insurance. I'm sorry. She looked at me, eyes wet. I'm so sorry. The room bent. For 1 second, I felt nothing but the cold clarity of a lab. Dance's gavel, an elegant pen, really, tapped once. Mr. Cohen, he said, voice like limestone, you are excused from this session pending counsel's guidance. Ms. Cohen, to me, not unkind, we will take your statement now. Daniel stood too slowly, as if the air had gotten thick. He turned as if to say something to me and found no words that would hold. Plot twist, the signature I gave had been stolen from our mortgage and glued to a midnight forgery, caught not by love, but by process. The door clicked after Daniel, and the room exhaled the way people do after an elevator stops between floors. Outside counsel stacked her legal pads. Dance adjusted his pen until it lay exactly parallel to the agenda. On the wall, Ira's remote square hovered like a second moon. Let the record reflect, counsel said, voice steady. The committee has struck the spousal consent labeled Cohen, Alina, received 2214 as invalid. We open a process inquiry regarding the use of an expired notary stamp and the provenance of the document. Ms. Cohen, your formal concern is accepted under Policy 3.2 and appended with Exhibits A through D. I nodded once, the way you do when a blood draw is done. Dance turned toward me, those limestone vowels sounded smooth. Ms. Cohen, please deliver your statement. I read it like medicine, dosage, intervals, side effects. No adjectives. At room 112, Bree's thermos clicked quietly. At retention, keep her quiet. Someone cleared a throat and then remembered microphones exist. Thank you, Vance said when I was done. We will move to an executive session with counsel, the compliance officer, and Ms. Walsh as secretary. Ms. Cohen, Ms. Betrayal, please wait in the hall. We may recall you. We filed out into carpet that swallowed footsteps. Bree leaned against the wall, face tilted toward the ceiling vent like a prayer. I sat on a bench and studied the wave in the glass opposite. My reflection stretched until it looked like someone else. A minute later, the committee secretary, Kay Walsh, opened the door a crack and slipped out, a folder hugged to her chest. She didn't meet my eyes, but as she passed, a square of paper slid from her fingers into my lap. It looked like a post-it that had lost its stick. 15/copy room C/bring your exhibits. I didn't look up. I tucked the note into October and went back to listening to the way silence has a pulse. At 15, I told Bree I needed water and walked softly past frosted glass labeled Copy C. The door was propped an inch with a plastic ruler. Inside, the hum of a printer sounded like a muffled hive. Walsh stood with one hand on the machine, the other on the folder. I have 2 minutes, she said, voice low, eyes on the paper tray. This never happened. I don't know what you mean, I said, equally low. She slid a stack toward me. Draft resolution for executive session. It was prepped yesterday. Before your email. Before the check. She tapped the first page. They plan to support the CEO with governance reinforcement. Committee speak for hand him a babysitter with a title. Recommend an immediate alignment sale to a buyer who has expressed informal interest. That buyer is Ira's holding company. Her mouth didn't move. The compensation alignment slides were going to be the cover. Your concern accelerated their timeline and changed the optics. I felt heat climb my neck. So the plan was always to, what? Push him out, sell him off, and call it a stewardship? Walsh's eyes flicked to the hall. The plan was to keep the asset clean and the press calmer than truth would allow. She pointed to a line item on page 3. Request spousal joinders be executed to prevent collateral claims. This morning's midnight notarization was the brute force version of that line. She looked up at me for the first time, gray eyes sharp. If you cave now, you become the lever that moves their sail. If you hold, you become the brake. Why are you telling me? My voice came out hoarse. She hesitated. A muscle worked in her jaw. Because minutes are written by the winners, she said finally. And I'm tired of writing fiction. That should have been the twist. It wasn't. She reached back into the folder and pulled a smaller, softer printout, edges worn where fingers worry paper. One more thing, she said. The consulting fees you mentioned? They're not just Vance's hobby fund. HR is on the ledger. Her finger landed on a name that vacuumed the air out of the room. Marcella Dunn Consulting LLC, $14,500 per month. Marcy's lanyard flashed in my mind like a warning light. She ran wellness audits that always concluded we should avoid disruptive PR. She drafted the mutual release clause Lila cut. I remembered Marcy's brittle smile. The way her lanyard had thumped when she nodded hardest. So HR was never neutral. HR is never neutral, Walsh said softly. We are a function of the business. She checked the door. You didn't hear any of this from me. If they smell this, they'll call me biased. I have a kid in daycare. I need my bias to be rent. The door opened a hair. Bree slid in like a rumor. They're about to call you back, she whispered. Security is walking Daniel out. Walsh's face didn't change, but her fingers did, a tiny flex, like releasing a handle. Make them put you in the minutes as present for executive session, she said. Policy allows it. Use the phrase affected stakeholder with direct bearing on the agenda item. She handed me a pen. And bring this. It's the only thing that makes men like that behave, ink in the open. We made it back to the bench as the door opened. Counsel's voice called my name. Ira's square flickered brighter on the wall when I re-entered. Vance steepled his fingers. Ms. Cohen, counsel said, the committee is moving toward appointing an interim operations lead pending outcome of this inquiry. We will also recommend engaging an external firm for a broader culture review. I glanced at Walsh. She didn't look up. I'm an affected stakeholder with direct bearing on the agenda item, I said, pull steady. Policy 3. 2 permits my presence in executive session when the subject matter originates in my filing. I asked to remain. The room stalled, like an engine deciding whether to turn. Counsel paged through a binder, lips moving. She's right, she said at last, almost amused. Policy covers it. Vance's mouth tugged. Very well, he said. Ms. Walsh, reflect Ms. Cohen's presence in the minutes. We sat. The door closed all the way. The temperature of the room seemed to drop 3 degrees. Before we proceed, I said, because the pen in my fingers had given me courage I didn't recognize, there is a conflict on the table. I slid the ledger Walsh had not given me, face down, toward counsel. Payments labeled consulting routed to an LLC associated with HR leadership. The author of the mutual release clause was not neutral. Counsel angled the paper, read, and then did a very small, very contained explode, a blink too long, a inhale too sharp. She passed it to Vance without fuss. He didn't blink at all. Ira, he said to the screen, we will need your holding company to answer whether a pre-wired alignment discussion occurred outside proper process. And we will need HR recused. Ira's face remained perfect. Of course, he said smoothly. No one wants the appearance of impropriety. Appearance tasted like metal. The next motion moved like a machine. Suspend Daniel's signing authority. Secure legal stamp. Freeze uploads from EA accounts. Call Marcy to step aside pending review. The pen tapped. The words that will become history cued in the secretary's hands. Then the true twist knocked. Kara, the assistant, reappeared at the door, flanked by security, cheeks splotched but chin high. He's not in the lobby, she said, voice gone small with dread. Daniel left the building at 43. He took the leather folio with Lila's stamp, and the boardroom USB. Counsel's head whipped. What USB? Walsh answered without looking up. The one with draft sale decks and board member conflicts flagged for counsel review. Labeled January Strawman. She could have said bomb. On the screen, for the first time, Ira's face moved out of perfect. Find him, he said, to no one and everyone. Now. I stood so fast my chair scuffed. Something feral and stupid kicked under my ribs. Flight, chase, rage. Bree grabbed my sleeve. Don't, she whispered. You're safer in the minutes than in the hall. She was right. And still, my hands wanted the folio. My throat wanted the air on the other side of the door. Ms. Cohen, Vance said quietly, a judge barrel calm in a courthouse storm. If he uses that stamp, everything we did here becomes theater. Then make it real, I said, before the part of me that performs learned to hush. Put in the minutes. I offered to escort legal to secure any remaining tools. Put in the minutes. I informed the committee that there are heat-reactive memos in circulation meant to coerce me. Put in the minutes. If anything happens to me between now and the conclusion of this inquiry, it started here. Walsh's pen scratched, solemn as a prayer. The room rustled to its feet. Counsel began issuing orders. Security peeled off toward elevators and stairwells. Ira's square dimmed and brightened as he dialed someone with influence. Bree pressed my thermos into my hands. Drink, she said. Your voice needs to last another hour. We made it to the doorway before Vance stopped us with a sentence so soft I almost missed the shape of it. Ms. Cohen, he said, eyes on me, not unpleasant, not kind. For what it's worth, your mortgage tale saved us today. The door swung open. The hallway yawned. Somewhere below, an elevator bell chimed ill-timed cheer. Security fanned out like a light being poured down stairwells. Counsel stayed in the room, phoning the state notary office to file an emergency fraud alert. Vance stood with his palms on the table, the old oak steadier than his committee. On the wall, Ira's square went a notch dimmer, the way screens do when they're listening and not talking. I was halfway to the elevators before Bree caught my sleeve. Don't, she whispered again, not letting go until Lila appeared with 2 security badges and a look that made the hallway feel like a plan. Legal stamp is already revoked in the state system, Lila said, breath controlled, facts stacked. If he uses it, every impression is fraud by definition. I swapped the physical stamper last month, serial etched in UV. We can tie any impression to the decoy. You set a trap, I said. I set a record, she corrected. Traps are for animals. Records are for people who misremember. The radio on the security guard's shoulder crackled, visual on subject. Sub-basement garage, Dock 3. He's with a mobile notary. Lila's mouth went flat. That'll be Polly. We retained him after the first complaint. Undercover. He's wired. Of course you did, Bree muttered, half astonished, half devoted. We took the stairs in a controlled hurry. The garage air was all wet concrete and brake dust. At Dock 3, Daniel was framed by the open maw of a loading bay, the leather folio under his arm like a prosthetic conscience. A sedan idled nearby. A small man in a puffer vest, Polly, stood by the trunk, a briefcase open to reveal a notary log that looked too clean. Daniel saw me first. He slid the folio onto a crate and raised both hands halfway, the universal sign for I'm harmless that always means I want you to think I am. Alina, he said, voice drenched in the tenor I used to believe. This is what they wanted. A circus. Ira's been angling a sale for months. Vance plays upright but calls him G on the phone. They were going to humiliate me and flip the company cheap. I was collecting proof. He tapped the folio. Board conflicts, backchannel emails, the ledger with HR payments. We can blow this up together. Come with me now. We tell the story before they write it. Lila didn't move. Put the stamp down, Daniel. He glanced at the red-capped stamper poking from the pocket of his coat, a telltale ton of plastic, and then did a theater's worth of regret. I shouldn't have taken it, he said, eyes finding mine, trying to land. But you know me. I panic. I fix. We can fix. You do shortcuts, I said, almost gently. And then you call it vision. He flinched, then the mask clicked back. You don't want to be the angry spouse whose email becomes a meme, he said, quiet and knife-bright. Deposit the check. Let them think you took the covenant. We'll unwind it later when the press dies down. I'll make you whole. He took a step closer. Polly shifted, just enough for the badge under his vest to flash. Daniel didn't see it. 2 guards did, and their hands uncurled. You're scaring me, I said truthfully. He softened beautifully, a man switching to the channel where he's a son, a husband, a boy who could never quite make the bed neat. I know, he said. I'm sorry. Just, sign one thing. He pulled a single sheet from the folio, paper trembling just enough to read as human. One signature and this all calms down. It's just an acknowledgement. Lila was already shaking her head. Don't you dare, she said to me, and to him, you dragged a notary to a dock to backdate a spousal consent after being excused from an audit committee. That's not an acknowledgement, that's a confession with paperwork. The elevator dinged, and 2 more security officers arrived with counsel at their shoulder. She spoke without raising her voice. Mr. Cohen, step away from the folio. Place the stamp on the crate. Hands where we can see them. For a second he did it, folly, stamp, hands, and then he calculated and didn't. He snatched the stamp instead, a sudden boy with a stolen toy, and slammed it onto the single sheet. The thunk echoed. The red cap popped. The impression bled faint purple under the garage fluorescence. Lila exhaled like a diver breaking surface. Thank you, she said, not to him. UV reads. You just notarized a felony with a counterfeit instrument. Polly closed his briefcase with a click that sounded like handcuffs. And on recording, he added softly, tapping his lapel. Daniel stared at the purple seal, at us, at the ring of people who used to orbit him. Something in him sagged, something I recognized from that first apartment when the rent was late and the charm was low. He put both palms flat on the crate like a man steadying himself on the edge of a bed. You think I'm the only one who cuts corners? He whispered. Counsel's voice did not change temperature. No, she said. But you are the one in the garage with a stamp. They took him without theatrics. Hands behind, not cuffed in front of me because someone had remembered optics. Security guided, Polly narrated for the wire. Lila watched as if learning how relief feels in the body. I didn't cry. It was graceless and ordinary, like most endings. Back upstairs, the committee reconvened. Walsh's pen moved like a prayer wheel. Motions marched. Suspend the CEO, appoint an interim, retain external counsel, preserve devices and logs, notify insurer, inform the broader board. HR's recusal was noted. Marcy's consulting arrangement paused pending review. Ira gave a statement that had the word integrity in it 3 times and my stomach in my throat once. I returned the cashier's check across the table to Vance. Under the cool brightness, the heat-reactive letters bloomed and then faded as the paper cooled, like a bruise changing its mind. For the record, I said, I did not deposit this. If anyone suggests otherwise, note that its first telephoto cameo was in a sizzle reel and its routing number predates my knowledge. Reflected, Walsh said, her gray eyes not leaving the page. On my way out, Lila stepped close enough that our sleeves spoke. We'll need you for statements, she said. Also, for what it's worth, I never booked room 112 to win. I booked it to make a record if I lost. You didn't lose, I said. Not today, she allowed. Bree waited by the elevators with a paper cup of water and a look that said everything without spilling. I think your tail saved them, she murmured. That long flourish. Your pharmacist calm. I got that tail from my mother, I said, surprising myself. She taught me that steadiness is a kind of noise cancelling. The doors opened. We stepped inside. Right before they closed, Walsh jogged toward us with a manila envelope. She slid it in before the doors could bite it. Inside, a single page on committee letterhead. Draft minutes, audit committee, 7 to 9/18. She had already captured my words with improbable kindness and surgical precision. No heroics, no adjectives. Just the spine of a day. At the bottom, a line waited. Attested by, ________________________________________________________________________________________________________________ I looked up. Walsh held out her pen through the narrowing crack. It should be you, she said. You're the affected stakeholder. The doors closed on her face before I could ask what that means for people like her, who write history and don't get to live inside it. I signed my name with the long tail. It felt less like a flourish and more like a tether. By noon, council had briefed the full board. By Friday, a polite press release said words like interim, transition, review. IRA's holding company's exploratory discussions were put on ice pending the inquiry. Bree sent me an invoice with a zero balance and the caption, pro bono, someday teach me how to sleep. Lila texted me a photo of the state database, stamp serial 9U54119, decommissioned. My inbox filled with HR-scented messages offering support that smelled like liability. 3 weeks later, the district attorney filed 3 counts: attempted fraudulent notarization, falsification of corporate records, obstruction. A 4th count added late, small, mean, harassment, tied to a complaint that wasn't mine. Daniel's lawyer called it overreach. His mother called me to ask if we could work it out. I said we were working it out, in public, with minutes. The day before the first hearing, an email pinged from the anonymous account that had started all this. No subject. An attachment, a PDF. Final approved minutes, audit committee, 7 to 9:18. I scrolled to the bottom out of habit. One line glowed with the quiet electricity of something that will outlive gossip. Prepared by K. Walsh, committee secretary. Beneath it, a second line that hadn't been there in the draft. Source exhibits received via anonymous compliance tipster, Catherine Walsh plus minutes at protonmail.com. And the message body, for words that made the whole story tilt and click as the doors of the elevator had that morning. I'm not who you think.